everyone, and welcome back to London Dialogues, where we talk to the authors and thinkers about topics pertaining to India. And today I have with us author of the book Kashir, a diabolical betrayal of Kashmiri Hindus, Sahana Vijayakumar, who wrote it in Kannada, and the translator to English is Hemant Shantigram. And along with them, we have Shonal Sher, who is a Kashmiri Pandit activist. So we will be talking about the books. Typically, we will go around 40, 45 minutes of discussion, and then we'll take questions from the audience. And I would open to Sahana to introduce herself and her book and talk a bit about it.
Hey Neil, namaste. Thank you for having me here.
Welcome, Sahana.
Thank you. So I am a technology professional based out of Bangalore, and writing has been my hobby. I've been pursuing it quite seriously. Kashir is my second novel. I started writing columns initially, and then the first novel was a contemporary subject. Kashir was the second one, and I have a third one called Avasana, which is based on the filial philosophy of Kamathipur and Pandharpur.
Right.
So yeah, so that's about me.
Right. Hemant, was this your first experience of translating a book or writing any kind, or have you done a
Yes,
sort of work
yes.
before?
Hi. Yeah, indeed. I'm a technology professional as well, and I'm based here in London. Writing to me, I used to be quite a prolific writer in the early 90s. Before the concept of blogging started, I had my own website, and it used to be quite cumbersome maintaining the content, etc. And somewhere along the line, I lost that fire and I stopped writing. But I did continue, writing poetry. Poetry comes naturally to me. Prose is something that I have to labor at. But Kashmir was a subject that I was quite passionate about. So when Sanaji reached out on Twitter asking for translators, I gave it a shot. So it's my first attempt at translating at this scale. Yeah.
Right, right. And welcome, Sonal, if you could introduce yourself quickly.
Namaskar, I'm Sonal Sher. I live in Surrey, UK. My normal sort of day-to-day work is finance, but being a Kashmiri sort of, I'm a Kashmiri sort of activist. Anything to do with Kashmir, sort of, I'm very, very connected to that. And obviously, when I found out about the book, when I was asked to join, so I obviously said yes because it's lovely to see people like Sahana and Hemant taking the time and talk about us. So thank you.
Right. So welcome everyone once again, and welcome everyone who's tuned in to listen to the webinar. Uh, I've just finished reading book a couple of days back, and it was gripping to say the least. It was unputdownable. I have not read in quite a couple of years. I think I've not read a book at this pace. It started off and finished in like within 2 days. What I really loved about it that this wasn't so when you pick a topic like where you have a lot of people who died before there is a genocide. Uh, Generally, retailing comes out as a rant a lot of time that people write, or typically in the case of Kashmir, what I have seen is that people when write about it, they put Kashmir in the background, and the rest of the story becomes the core of it. You see the movies being made, you see the novels being written. It could have been at the back of any other tragedy. Uh, this book was trying to explore that what has happened. It was not trying to get angry at anyone. It was not trying to, kind of say that listen to us and we need you to solve our problem. Listen to the story. This was about the solution. So like we are going to go out, we are going to figure out what went wrong. We have a character who's not trying to be judgmental about anyone. There are other characters, each of them have their story. So when you put these kind of like essentially there are 8 to 10 characters who have their own journey, and none of them are one which you would really hate or you really pity on. Each of them have their own confidence, their own capabilities, their own failings, and the total sum of the story is an outcome of what happened in their life with their character put together. So, Sahana, how much went into finding out? Because it has research about people, a general understanding of what people went through in their life during that time. And then it has research on religion and culture to put together, right? So, what went in when you started writing? And to begin with, what led you to start writing this?
Yeah. So usually when we encounter a problem, there are two ways of looking at it. One is we get very reactive and emotional. The other
Right.
is we try to analyze the root cause, get some learnings out of it, and be prepared in case we encounter it again. How do we tackle it?
Yeah.
Kashmir is a very unique and complex problem. The main challenge is the philosophical tussle here. I mean, the philosophy of Sanatana Dharma versus the theology of the predatory religion Islam.
Right.
So this intrigued me a lot because how is it that a religion that was founded in the Arabian desert in the 7th century AD spread its tentacles so far and wide?
Hmm.
And how is it that a person who led a prophetic life for just 23 years instilled so much hate and fanaticism in the minds of his followers? We see the same bloodshed which was there in 7th century AD. Even then, it was being called beheading, which was so ruthlessly done and which is very relevant to this day. So when
Yes.
I looked at it, I was very much keen in understanding how did India react, because India was did not begin at 7th century. We have a very vast history. In the ancient Indian context, we had these ruthless rulers. I mean, if you look at Arthashastra, Kautilya broadly classifies these rulers as Dharma Vijayi, Lobha Vijayi, and Asura Vijayi. Dharma Vijayi is the one who's content with the victory. Lobha Vijayi seizes the land and money of the vanquished. He's done there. But the Asura Vijayi, he seizes the land, the money, the heirs, the wives, and puts the king to death. So we knew such rulers existed, but we also had our own rule book, which we followed for the battles. For example, if you were my opponent and if you were distressed, I would not attack you. If you abandoned your weapon, you showed your back, I would not attack you. So we went by our own rules. And what was totally unknown to us during those days were invasion and conversion. These are very important because ancient India was invasion free. We had these Greeks coming up, but then they gelled with us and they became our viceroys who were there for a very brief amount of time and were sent back. When you come to medieval India, the understanding was still missing. I mean, we did not know how to deal with these marauders who were so ruthless, who were alien. Because if you look at the instance of Prithviraj Chauhan, if you take the account of Firishta, Prithviraj was misled. Ghori declared ceasefire. Prithviraj believed it. His troops went for their ablutions. Then they were massacred. So, and Muhammad Ghazni repeatedly attacked us at least 17 times, is what the records say, Somnath temple. So, why is it that he attacked so many times? It's our magnanimity because we believe in this Udara Charitanantu Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We
Right.
forget that for us, the entire world is a family, but for them, it is not. So, behind Ghazni going back unharmed each time, there must have been this magnanimity at play. Some or the other king might have showcased this so much. And this mindset continued again in the modern Indian context. I'll give you one example of one of the most revered gurus of southern India. A Christian goes to him and he begs him, asks him, Guruji, please take me into your fold. I want to be converted to a Hindu. The Guru says, no, you be a good Christian, you will be a good Hindu automatically. Now that is where we go wrong. A good Christian has to spread his message of peace and love. A good Christian has to convert. A good Muslim has to claim that Allah is the only God. So we always fail to comprehend what is the version of the other side, what is the ideology or the theology that they are trying to propound. The only person who acted on ground was Swami Dayanand Saraswati. He understood this conversion. He was very clear in his mind about the impact of these invasions because they were trying to convert us, and that's how he founded Arya Samaj. And Arya Samaj started taking everybody back into its fold. All the converts were again being, reconverted to Hinduism. And then we had Vivekananda, who had read Islam as clearly as the Advaita philosophy. We had Ambedkar, who has written this book, Pakistan or Partition of India, in which he clearly calls out the tenets of Islam. He ridicules it for its burqa system, for its brotherhood. He doesn't hesitate in calling out all the tenets. So we have had these indicators, but even now we are so helpless. I mean, we really did not make use of any of these. A very few were learned, a very few tried to implement, and but the overall impact on the society was nothing. There were no learnings that we took. So the template that was set was Kashmir for us. It's just a template and it's successful. If you look at their perspective, They have
Right.
achieved what they wanted to. So this was what triggered. And I began with the reading the life of the prophet, because that has been intriguing me for quite some time now. The
Mhm.
Semitic religions in general and Islam in particular. And then it led me to research on the other aspects, the social, the political, the cultural. That's the flavors that you see, you just mentioned. So that's how it all began. And it would be incomplete had I not visited Kashmir, because unless I experienced the pain, the desolateness, and the fear, I would not be able to effectively express, and I would not get a nuanced view, the one that you just mentioned. It's
Yeah.
not a rant, it's about everybody living their life and coming
Mhm.
out with what they feel. So for
Right.
that nuanced view, I had to visit, and that's how it came up.
Right. Hemant, how was it for you to read this story and then trust? So there are two kind of readers, right? When I read, my perspective is to just take in what is there, but your perspective was to read, understand, and then put it back in another language. And there will be few move from what how the story sounds in one language to another language. So you needed to grasp in more. Was there a lot of new learning here for you? Was it something which you were aware of? And how that process went around?
Yeah, so for me, more than new learning, there was a bit of unlearning that I had to do. In that,
Mhm.
like I said, I took this up as a project of passion because that subject was something that was very close to my heart. I've been a student of Advaita, reading Shankaracharya, and that's how I got into Kashmiri Shaivism, etc. And I have some very good Kashmiri Hindu friends that I've kind of met through my career, etc. So I had this emotional response to this subject, and you actually have picked it up pretty well in that none of the characters in these are very emotional, or it's not a rant, right? So for me, there was that emotional connect with that subject. But when I first read, it kind of resonated. The overall story resonated very well with my belief. But the bit that I had to unlearn was to let go of my own emotions about the subject. There wasn't enough anger, so to speak, right? Because I was angry about the subject, but I had to unlearn, I had to let go of that and basically get to what the story that Sahana has weaved together, which, as you will agree, um, um, to understand Kashmir, you probably will need to read three or four subjects, politics, religion, history, theology of Islam, and various other things in almost a non-fiction way, to take all that subject which can in their own thing be very dry for a fiction reader, to take that and weave that into a story so very well. For me, it was letting go of my anger and the emotional connect I had, and actually relate to the characters the way Sahana wants the readers to connect.
Right.
And also, it was my first attempt at translating. So there was a bit of a learning curve for me as well as to what that translation process is. And in the end, I got there. That basically it needs to understand the intent of the story that Sana has put together, and
Right.
communicate that as accurately as possible, and as lucidly and easy to understand language as possible. So both in the technical aspects of translation, as well as in letting go of my personal connect and connecting to the story that Sana is trying to tell. Those were the things that I had to do as a process of translation here.
Right. So taking a lead from what you said about the unlearning bit and getting away from the perceptions people have or the emotions that are leading the reaction to a subject,
Mm.
uh, I want to open it to wider issue. Is that what is the relevance when you come and there's a retelling of the story is happening and people want a conversation to happen? A, what is the relevance of Kashmir in itself in terms of a broader Indic civilization and India? And second, what is the relevance of the events of 1990s? And it's not one-off event. We know that there is a history of exodus and violence in the valley, which dates much earlier than 1990s. So what's the relevance of that today? And I'll just give a background to that question, and I would open that with Sonal, and then we will just go on with that as we have something to chip in. Uh, the background of this question is that whenever you raise the topic of Kashmir, the usual tropes are that, oh, why we are talking about now when it's something that happened in the past, or the people who got affected have moved on their life and they're doing pretty well. So, A, why the Kashmir itself is very relevant and alive in the broader story of India, and why we really need to talk about the events that have happened in 1919, preceded by many such events before. So, Sonal.
So yeah, so I think the first thing that I have to kind of say is I can't approach this subject without emotion, because I've actually been through that. I was there, you know, at the last time it happened, and everything that you read about, especially the night of the 19th January, I was there because I have actually sort of, you know, suffered from that. Now, why is Kashmir important? Kashmir has, or it's the seat of sort of, you know, a lot of knowledge that we hold sacred in Indic traditions and custom. A lot of kind of big sort of Sanskrit works that were written in Kashmir by Kashmiris. A lot of Vedic knowledge that stems down from Kashmir. A lot of people actually traveled through the length and breadth of India, and they would go to the mountains there and actually, you know, speak to people there, speak to the sages, rishis there. So there's thousands and thousands of years of history that connects Kashmir to the rest of India. Now, if we sort of just pull that right back and actually sort of look at now, geopolitically, Kashmir is very, very important right now, because we share borders with a lot of nations that are, you know, aggressors. So, sort of, you know, if you go from one side to the other, Kashmir is really, really important. Either way we look at it, as sort of Indians, as Hindus, from you know, just to carry on our traditions and customs, and also as a nation to actually protect our borders. So my question was actually to Sahana, as a Kashmiri Hindu, you know, what actually prompted you to pick up the topic? Because for me, that's actually something that interests me. I wanted to know that.
Yeah. So Kashmir has always been a problem. So what
Just
usually
an information, Sana. So this is right out of the book, the conversation I'm seeing, because in the book, the character Narendra, when he writes about with a lot of detail about Kashmir, the first question arises that why somebody in Bangalore knows so much about Kashmir. That's the first thing that arises there.
yes. So what actually happens is about Kashmir for a person who is a South Indian and a Bangalorean. When you read the life of Adi Shankaracharya, you see that he's gone to Kashmir, the Sarvagnya Pitha, which is now in POK. You know, there was a discourse, philosophical discourse in which he participates. And we have the example of Bilhana, who comes down to Karnataka, and Vikramanka Deva Charita is his work. Chalukya King Vikramaditya VI. It was under his reign that he wrote this book. And we have so many examples. Abhinava Gupta, who writes on the Bharatamuni's Natya Shastra. That is the best commentary, authentic commentary that we have. Now, these apart, whenever I spoke to Kashmiris, I only saw their emotional face. I did not see that Kshatra at all. To be very honest, they would only recall this, they would only feel bad and they would start shedding tears. I mean, I don't know about Sonal, but to whomever I have spoken on or off the camera, they have ended up crying. What really intrigued me, if you have read the chapter 5, it's about the Kshatra Guna. We have lost the Kshatra quality. That was the key. That was the first Dharma. There is a shloka also. Kshatro dharmo hyadi devat paschadanya shesha bhutashta dharmaha. The Prime Lord first created the Kshatra Dharma. So why was our Kshatra at loss? Was the first question that actually bothered me, because there was not one Kashmiri Hindu who said, "Come on, let us do something about it, or let us go." You know, it was like, this happened to us. This happened to us. Yes, it happened to us. So who were collectively responsible? We as a nation are responsible. But what did you do during that period? If you have read the book, that's the question Narendra asked. Panditji, what did you do? Hridaynath Pandit, who is a Purohit at the Shankaracharya Hill, only cribbed. When Narendra asks, he starts introspecting. Yes, what did I do? So this helplessness is the common feature, which actually bothered me a lot. And that's when I got into the theology of Islam to see where does it originate from. How is it this mindset? Because none of us have experienced Kashmir. Now, this said, it doesn't mean that because uh, uh, they are over emotional or they're overreacting, because they have faced it and I don't know. It's just the words that I have listened to, or I can only imagine. I have not really gone through, so it must be really very scary. So, what is it that caused all this? Was the main thing that intrigued me. And the other thing is, there was nobody to give sufficient information. I mean, people did not know. They just knew that Article 370 existed. There was only a legal problem. Was it only a legal one? No. See, even after revoking Article 370, the problem is not going to end so soon. It's not about the 370 at all. It's about the cultural thing. It's about how we have been uprooted from there. It's going to take a lot of time for us to reestablish ourselves there. So there was no proper information coming. Nobody knew. And the facts were very hard to dig out. So because of this, and the pain of the community actually drove me, because when we have so many people coming from that place, as Sonal was mentioning, our Sanskrit literature, our aesthetics, Indian poetry is so much full of the contributions from them. So what is it that led to this state was what bothered me a lot.
Mhm. So, uh, when you say that there's a problem and 370 is not going to solve that immediately, the very first step when we are going to talk about any solution is the recognition that there is a problem and these were A, B, C reason why the problem happened in the first place. There are two things entirely missing, as I understand, is that A, it was a genocide, and there's a recognition that is missing. So you do not identify a problem, which the minute you call it just an exodus, the solution is people need to go back. But when you talk about genocide, people need to go back in a place where this thing will not repeat again. And when you talk about something not repeating again, then you need to understand what created the environment in the first place, right? So what was it? Was it a, like a lot of people try to say, it's a societal social issue, that there was disparity and that led to it. There was people try to put it out as a political issue, that there were political friction and the government was failing and government had no control on what's happening in state. uh, some people try to pose it as purely a cross-border issue, that there was sponsor terrorism and then the thing just went downhill from there. And then there is a religious issue. So what was it? Was it one thing? Was it a mix of all of things? How people put that together? And how not able to put a recognition of it as a genocide has affected moving ahead from there?
Did you want me to answer that, Neil?
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, this is open forum now, so please.
Okay. So I think we all look at Kashmir right now as a political problem, because every time everybody speaks about Kashmir, they'll say, oh, it's a problem between Pakistan and India. And it's not that. Actually, what you have to look at is the civilizational issue. It's a religious issue. We were persecuted because we were Hindus. That is the end of it, that there is no other way. We were persecuted because we were Hindus. And we have been persecuted continually for the last 700 years. So this was not, as people might know, not the last time we left. There were sort of 6 other times this has happened to us. Um, Now, when it comes to recognizing genocide, I'm going to just sort of leave that to the side for a second. But what I'm going to say is that we know one of the things that never happened was no proper sort of documentation was done. No one actually knows how many Kashmiris left exactly. No one actually knows how many Kashmiri Hindus were killed exactly. No one actually knows how many women were brutally raped. No one knows the level of arson. No one knows how much land was grabbed, how many houses were destroyed. So even if we don't look at genocide right now, the state of India actually hasn't done anything. Have we even punished one person for a crime? They up to very, very recently, we've had actually terrorists who were proper terrorist leaders, and they were actually sort of, sitting at the same table as the government of India and having a conversation. We know that there are nations for example, the United States that have this policy that we do not negotiate with terrorists, but apparently when it comes to India, that obviously doesn't seem to be the case. So nothing has been done, not a single case. So if someone, next door to me has been killed, those people have never been brought to justice. Now, when we come to genocide, India has not defined genocide by law. It ratified the UN Convention about 5 decades ago. But I think if you speak to someone, they will just say that everything that we have in law covers all of it. I just sort of wrote this down here. And genocide is killing members of a group by targeting them, which is what happened to Kashmiri Hindus. Genocide also means causing serious bodily harm or mental harm, which is actually what happened to Kashmiri Hindus, deliberately inflicting conditions that destroy a group's way of life. Kashmiri Hindu culture, as we know now, is almost extinct. A lot of Kashmiri Hindus don't speak the language. We're barely keeping hold of our culture, our customs. And when Sahana said, a lot of people don't know what happened because we have been inflicted over hundreds and hundreds of years. We've been sort of tortured to the point where even going to a temple, you had to sort of cower down and actually do it by not disturbing the Muslims that were living there in the valley. The other sort of things are imposing measures to prevent births, but I could always say that once everyone sort of left for Jammu, conditions were such that actually I think we've lost an entire generation wasn't born because people were living in tents. So we've actually have lost entire generations of Hindus. Forcibly taking children from one group, I think they've probably just missed out on that one. So genocide, I think one of the biggest things that the government of India has to do is recognize that this was a genocide. And I know it's probably a bit embarrassing to admit it, but until the government does that, we can't go forward. You can't actually start fixing anything before you actually admit what the problem is in the first place.
Absolutely, absolutely. If I may come in, I think you kind of summarized exactly what is wrong and what the issue is. And let me say this: Hindus, we are people without a country. India is not a Hindu country, right? And enshrined in its constitution is discrimination against Hindus. So to expect India as a state to recognize what happened in Kashmir, what happened to Hindus as a genocide, until something fundamentally changes with the way India sees itself as a nation, that will not happen. And the reason why I say this is the world today is divided into free thinking societies, if there are any, and there are three major totalitarian systems: Islam, Christianity, and Marxism. They have a book. They control every aspect of a human life, right from how you think, and that's what they are. They masquerade as religions, not Marxism, of course. Islam and Christianity, they masquerade as religions, but they are totalitarian systems. And India, during emergency, we kind of called ourselves secular and socialist. First of all, the constitution itself was never ratified by the public, and socialist and secular tag got attached during emergency in the most undemocratic way. And this is who we are today. We are a socialist, secular republic. Apparently, I don't know what that means, but it definitely is not a Hindu, is not a country for Hindus. And we see that happening today. Temples are being vandalized. Temples are controlled by government. No other place of religious worship is controlled by government. We are in fact paying a jizya tax actually for being Hindus, because temple money is taken and used for other purposes. Right now, that said, what happened in Kashmir is definitely religious, but why that has been made to kind of sink away from people's imagination, to be totally forgotten, is totally the Marxist agenda. They have ensured that it's nowhere in the textbook. We probably know more about Jewish Holocaust than our own partition or what happened in Kashmir. And right from textbook or history lessons, everything, we have wiped out everything that has happened to us Hindus throughout India, not just Kashmir. And in this, existing in this ecosystem, where every aspect of your opinion building avenues that you have are controlled by these totalitarian systems, like controlled by Islamist interests or Marxist interests, there is no way our story is going to be told. And particularly for Kashmiri Hindus, their agency is taken away. They can't authentically tell their story. They have been given a government certificate that they are migrants. They are not migrants, but that's what their certificate said. They can't even tell authentically what has happened to them. When you take away that agency to tell their stories, at the end of the day, we are the stories we tell. If Kashmiris cannot tell their story, what are they? And to me, why this is so important is what happened in Kashmir 30 years ago and how easily we have forgotten. It is happening elsewhere. It is happening in Kerala. It is happening in West Bengal. It is happening in Tamil Nadu. Just this morning, I saw somebody tweeting that Dharmic Hindus from Tamil Nadu should consider moving out because there's election happening there shortly. Things are going to get very bad for them. This is happening, and Hindus, like the proverbial frog that is getting slowly boiled, is they're not realizing what's happening to them. So Kashmir is a pan-India issue. We need to wake up, and that's why this book Kashmir becomes so important for everybody to read, not only to know what happened in Kashmir and what happened to Kashmiri Hindus, but to pick up clues from that and see around themselves. It is happening everywhere. So it is a wake-up call for all of us that we should not let another Kashmir happen, and we need to find ways for Kashmiris to return back to Kashmir and get on with their lives. Sorry for a bit of an emotional rant there, but I had to get it out.
So I'll just bring in one statement I have had when after reading books I was having discussion with a few people, and there was this very interesting statement that I got, and I would take comment of everyone on that. Is that Kashmir was a religious problem which happened in 1990, but Kashmir is a continued political problem perpetrated by New Delhi. So I found this statement very interesting. And do you have, Sahana, do you have something to add to that or put on that thought?
Yes, very much. Kashmir is at core a religious problem. I just like to call out one Battle of Badr, that I have written in the novel.
Yes.
So this battle was mainly between the Prophet of Islam after he'd converted to Islam, he'd become a Muslim, and the pagan Arabs who were Quraysh. So this battle revived Islam altogether. The Prophet was on the verge of losing because it was 13 years since he had founded this religion and not many had converted. So he had migrated from Mecca to Medina, and that is where he fights with these pagan Arabs. So this battle is very important because on the Prophet side, there are hardly 300 people. On the pagan Arabs, there are around 900 people. But due to chance and due to the sandstorm, etc., they managed to win. And this win is so much, it so much exalts him that he believes, not only he, everybody else believes that the Battle of Badr is the source of inspiration. There is a wonderful book, Quranic Concept of War, which is written by Brigadier S.K. Malik. I have listed it in my bibliography, where he very clearly identifies the jihad with the Islamic warfare. All the religious sanctions that are required for the jihad is given by Quran itself. He maps these, and every person quotes Battle of Badr, no matter in which part of globe jihad is being fought. In India's context, in 1949, one of the ministers of Saudi Arabia compares the Kashmir conflict or the Kashmir unrest to jihad. And that's when Sardar Patel writes this to Nehru. There is a good collection of Sardar Patel's letters. So in one of his letters, Patel highlights this to Nehru and shows, see, this is the actual problem. So this Battle of Badr is always referenced because we are not very much used to listening to this. We overhear or we even ignore, but this is what is happening elsewhere, and this happened in Kashmir. So this was
Right.
one of the reasons. And post that, it's been an administrative failure. It's been a complete failure because there was no need to take this to the United Nations. First mistake by Nehru. There was no need to call for ceasefire because we were on the verge of capturing the Pak occupied Kashmir, which we have now lost. So we were on the verge of conquering it back, and then he suddenly announced a ceasefire. And then the Article 370, which was supposed to be a temporary one until the Constituent Assembly comes into play and then it ratifies the accession. That was the pure intent. Let us have an interim uh, constitution until the Constituent Assembly is formed. And once the Assembly ratifies, let us merge with the country. That was the understanding.
Right.
But Constituent Assembly came, it ratified, it was dissolved, nothing was done for 370. So we had to bring in a presidential order in 2019 to abrogate it. So this is a series. The foundation was the religious inspiration, yes, that remains true elsewhere. But
Yeah.
afterwards, what succeeded was a series of political mistakes or the administrative failure.
Right. So, how crucial is the abrogation of Article 370, and does this contribute effectively towards moving towards any solution?
Is that for
So
me?
Anyone. I mean,
Sonal can take it up. Yeah.
Well, I think sort of Article 370, I remember sort of waking up on the 5th of August and actually looking at, I think, on Facebook or something and reading, and to be honest, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that it was done because ever since I was born, this was one of those things, that's how we're different. And everybody was included, you don't have a choice. You were never asked if you actually wanted to be, part of Pakistan, you wanted to be independent, or you wanted to be with the rest of India. And so when I saw that, I was just so excited. It was just one of those biggest things that almost, someone had actually sort of done something big for me. And then once the sort of, the hoopla sort of slightly died out, we tried to see what difference does it make to my life, what difference does it actually make to the Kashmiri Hindu community. And the answer sort of, a few years now is nothing. It doesn't make a difference to what happened to me or my people or the community, because as things stand, we cannot go back. When we left, I think we were about 5% of the population, and we were scattered. So there were some villages where there were maybe 3 or 4 families left, and a lot of villages where no one was left because everyone was massacred. So when you're asking, Article 370 has been abrogated, 35A, which was kind of slipped in slyly, is not there anymore, and it's open, and as a woman, I get my rights back. But where do I go? My home that I lived in or that my parents had is occupied. Who is going to actually look at that? Who is actually going to look at forcible sales? Who's actually going to look at, are we going to be getting our houses back? And once I do get my house back, um, I live there, but everything around me I'm still living in that hostile environment where I am the target. So basically, you're asking Kashmiri Hindus that, oh, you know what, we've done this for you. Now go back with a big target on your backs, because nothing has changed on the ground. So the only solution is, obviously, I think that can only happen once government of India sort of recognizes that there is a problem, and that's not going to change, essentially, is actually maybe have a smart city or something to that effect where we can go back. Because right now what's happening is, once my generation sort of dies, there's no sort of last living link to that culture. My children won't have the same connect to Kashmir that I have because they've been born here. And as we know, any culture, any civilization needs that little cradle to survive. It needs its culture, it needs the language, it needs customs, it needs sort of the whole environment. When people live abroad, they go back to their village. Gujaratis, is a massive community throughout the world, but there's Gujarat there that kind of always feeds it back. We need We need Kashmir to sort of, we need our civilization is essentially, what we have been carrying for the last 5,000 years. Kashmiri Hindus are the only people who are still carrying it, because people who converted throughout the rest of the years are not really carrying that part of civilization. We are the ones who are still carrying it. But we need somewhere to nurture it. And right now we're scattered throughout the world, and we can't. We're slowly losing everything. And then essentially, ethnic cleansing, genocide, whatever you want to term it, you're just going to be reading about us in books if the government of India doesn't do something really, really quickly.
Right. So I'll take a segue from there and I'll pose a question about the book and from the book. So there's a very interesting point in the book which the character Mushtaq, I believe, raises, is that he feels bad that Hindus who have been expelled out of the state and been attacked upon, they are doing much better than those who have left behind, right? And it's a very popular trope to use to say that, see, nothing happened to this community. This is a thriving community and people are well to do, they are rich, they are not what the stereotypical image of a refugee or of a persecuted people you would think of, right? Does that. So now, when you talk about that, the current generation, which first hand saw it and experienced the events of 1990s, they go out and the next generation who have not had a direct association with the violence that was perpetrated of them, they will lose out the context and some level of association that the current generation still have to go back. So, are we seeing two things here? Is that one, is there another set of rising resentment because the Hindus, Kashmir Hindus, are doing so well in the valley, resentment against them, which kind of blocks the current generation living there from accepting them coming back and saying these are the well-to-do people, these are not persecuted people, why they are trying to come back and take things which is in the valley. So is there a rising second level of rising resentment, largely driven by the lack of understanding that no, they are, with the lack of recognition that they are persecuted, now leading to another set of resentment when the process of sending them back is in the process progress.
For if I was thinking, if I was to think about maybe like a 20-year-old Kashmiri Muslim right now,
Yeah,
they've been brought up in this environment where we are the enemy for
yeah,
whatever reason. And if we do come back, they are going to look at us as outsiders, because that is all they have been told. They don't know anything else, because if you're told something repeatedly from birth, that's what you start to believe. So I don't actually blame them, to be perfectly honest. I don't, because who I actually blame is the generation that did that to their father, their grandfather, because they seem to be happy living in this state of denial. Every time online, because I haven't been home, you speak to a Kashmiri Muslim, and they will say to you, some of them, not all, will say to you, you know what, Kashmir is incomplete without you. We really miss you. And don't you remember how good it used to be? We used to live like brothers and sisters. And 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 I don't know what to say genuinely, because it wasn't like that. It was the people who lived there, it was our neighbors who pointed fingers and said, you know what, this pandit, he's actually hiding there, go and kill him. It was our friends who did that to us. So they are complicit. And I don't know how they're going to sort of pull themselves out of that guilt and actually accept that this happened. And if they're not willing to do that, they're hardly going to tell their children. So anytime anything happens, sort of resettlement of
right.
Kashmiri Hindus, we are going to be looked at as outsiders. We are the indigenous inhabitants of the land. And in fact, I've actually read it somewhere. I can't recall right now, but somewhere it said that you're forcing these Hindu people to go to the valley, a Muslim-dominated valley, and that's almost how it's being presented now.
Right.
So it's a
So,
difficult one.
with that, I would like to summarize and move towards the end. And my final question to everyone is that then where the solution lies? What is the conclusive solution? Like we talk about rehabilitation and we talk about safer city, but what is there when we can say this problem is now solved?
That's a really, really good question. I don't know if sitting thousands of miles away, I have the answer for you. I think For the last sort of all these years when I have been, all I've been actually trying to do is raise awareness that this has happened. Because every time I spoke to someone in India, everywhere, no one knew what was going on. People just, they would say, your Kashmir is beautiful. Yeah, okay. What are you doing here? Why are you here? And they didn't even know that this had happened, that hundreds of thousands of people were forced to leave their homeland. I think the only person who can actually do that is the government of India, and they need to just stop sort of playing appeasement politics, and actually make sure that to be called a democratic republic, socialist, secular, whatever they want to call it, actually take some steps to make sure that the crimes that were committed on the land are punished, and people who were actually victims are resettled. So I'm going to leave it to the government of India, because as far as I'm concerned, it's their job. It's their job to protect the citizens, and they failed to do that.
Right. Sahana, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the first thing we need to do is get rid of the term secularism. We got it inserted forcibly during the emergency, 1976, the 42nd Amendment. We don't want to call ourselves secular. Let us call ourselves a Hindu country. And in addition to what India can do, I think it's a collective responsibility of the nation. As Sonal rightly said, let's have a smart city, and let not only the Kashmiri Hindus go, let the rest of India also relocate. Let a major chunk of the people from different states go in there, probably for job opportunities or whatever industries are set up. I think that way, that demographic change can somehow be tackled with. But a good share of people have to go there, not just asking the Kashmiri Pandits to go back and again continue to live in the same hostile situation, fearing for their life.
Right, right. Fine. So, Hemant, do you have something to add to that?
Well, I think
Looking at your
Sana
situation.
covered it. Yeah, without sounding utopian, I think we have to call ourselves a Hindu country, a dharmic nation, and dharma, by definition, the very root word of dharma is to hold things together, right? It is a plural, all-encompassing system that it will carry everybody. So we have to recognize that we are a dharmic nation, and only then we can actually balance out these things. That one. And second thing is, just like after this generation, the next generation of Kashmiri Hindus growing wherever they will have lost touch with what happened to them. Also, the Muslims in Kashmir also, they would lose touch with the original perpetrators, and they will have only grown up with the propaganda and lies that they have been fed, right? So the solution to this is a um, uh, uh, slow de-indoctrination, basically, and for that to happen, we need a complete overhaul of this system, and that's why we need to become not a secular nation, but a dharmic nation that goes back to its roots of plurality. Teach that to our kids. With Article 370 gone, opportunities can come, development can happen, so investment can go into Kashmir. So the youth have other things to keep themselves occupied rather than just get brainwashed, right? So
Right.
it's a slow process, but unfortunately, for the Kashmiri Hindu community, this is the last link. This generation is the last link. So whether there can be a true settlement within this generation. It depends on how fast the Indian government can act. But going by the entrenched mindsets that are today, even with say 303 MPs, they can't enact a law and hold on to it. I'm not very optimistic that that can happen, but the seeds of it must be sown, and we as collective Hindus, we need to kind of create that pressure group, pressure block, so that the government will not, divide and rule us, and they will have to listen to us. If we, as 800 million people, become one vote block, then the governments, no matter which party it is, will have to listen to us. But right now, I think even we are divided. I think that's where the solution lies. That we have to create a pressure group that we can get the government to listen to us, and take us back to our the Hindu nation that we have to be.
Right. 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 So with that, I'll take a few questions now before we close the session. We are reaching our 1 hour time. I have from Abhay Sharma. When we going to tell the correct history about Kashmiri Pandits and genocide done with them? Bollywood always plays in the lap of general narrative, and film like Kashmir Files with by are the films like Kashmir Files by Vivek Agnihotri going to make an impact? So I had started off with that, but we did not get into that part of it. Is that whenever there is a narrative or whenever the story is being told within the movie or the book, Kashmir and the Kashmir issue takes a backstage self. It's generally either romanticizing the terrorism or it's a love story that's happening in the back on the background of Kashmir, right? So has that impacted the perception also, and is there a scope for that to change? Are we seeing a shift in that?
If I may answer that,
Yeah.
I did say that
Mhm.
Islam, Christianity, and Marxism are that they're all totalitarian system. They're actually competing for the same space, so they will not fight each other. Now, Christianity was the first one that started this, but they, over the period, I mean, Goan Inquisition was even worse than what happened to Kashmiri Hindus. But they kind of reformed themselves and became more and more sophisticated in achieving their goals, and they've taken over the social charity kind of space. So everything that you see as charity, scratch the surface, and you find the same totalitarian agenda.
Right.
Islam is still in a crude way, still carrying on with its medieval approach, but the Marxists, the latest entrant, they have been the most conniving in that they have taken over this liberal art space. They have taken over the storytelling space, right? We, as a nation, we are the nation of storytellers. Storytelling is our thing, and that space is taken over. I mean, I don't know about the other language literatures, but in Kannada, literature, from classical to Renaissance to modern literature. Then it becomes revolutionary literature, and what's the translation for atrocity literature? They all have become a form, right? So propaganda has become a mainstream of storytelling. So there is no authentic storytellers now, right?
Mhm.
And that's what has happened with Bollywood, right? So people in India, because we like stories, we rely on many vast population. They rely on Bollywood to tell them history story, and that space is taken over by these agendas, and that is in fact a huge contributor to all the obscurity around some genuine issues. And to see that some of the Kashmir Files, that movie, I think it's recently come up, and I stopped watching or following Bollywood since 90s.
Yeah.
So I don't
Kashmir
know
Files,
what
I think,
happened.
is still to come. Still
Yeah,
to come.
okay.
So
Yeah,
like,
but that space is very much propaganda, and any contrary views coming up, they don't find space. The industry pushes them away.
mhm.
It's only the people who toe the line who become stars and have much clout in that space. So that is the space that we have to occupy. We have to have more Indic storytellers. I mean, we have a lot of Indic scholars who are coming up with a lot of nonfiction, genuine scholarly writings, but that doesn't reach the masses. That reaches only the inquisitive few who actually have that inclination for academic rigor. It is the storytelling space that we have to occupy, and we have to get authentic Indic people telling stories that intrinsically we all understand. We know what Dharma is, even though we may not be able to articulate.
Right.
We know what it is. It connects, and we want those people, the storytellers, who can connect those things and create them, spark those Indic thoughts.
Mhm.
And I think this is the last generation, even in that space, because what's coming out of Indian academic structure is taking us far and far away from that dharmic root. So that space we need to get more and more people like Sahana actually to write more Indic stories.
Yep. I have next question from Gautam as for Sahana. Has the journey of writing this book scarred you emotionally?
Yes, very much. Just to put it briefly, before I left, there were what was on my mind was the story of Bashir's family, Bashir Ahmed's family, and Kailash Pandit. So
Mhm.
I just thought of writing an emotional story. And after I went there, it was so difficult to have 3 meals a day. I mean, it was very distressing for me because I visited Kashmir as well as the Jagti township in Jammu. And believe me, they are in a very pathetic state. And after coming back, my plot was lost. I mean, I really had become blank. I did not know what to do because writing an emotional story would be still possible, but would I dig into the root cause? Would I do justice to the subject? Was what
Mhm.
haunted me for many days. I couldn't make up my mind and I couldn't somehow proceed with the original storyline. That's why you see Kailash Pandit's story coming in the form of a diary. That's a
Yep.
technique I've used. It comes
Yeah.
as a diary after the second half, during the second half of the book.
Yeah.
So when I started looking into these details, I felt this should be the way of putting it. I mean, I was very scared that this would not be a work of art with so many facts, so many administrative and technical things, but I had no other go. Nothing else would have testified me. Nothing else
Right.
would have given me the solace. So I found this way where Narendra is a debater, and then I bring up everything: the secularism, the history, the political aspect, and then Kailash Pandit's story also reveals.
Yeah.
So yes, I had a tough time actually.
Right. I don't have any other question. I have a comment from Jasmine, which says it's important to highlight in a big visible way through social and cultural media the fact of massive genocide that happened. One idea is to have massive traveling exhibit of genocide with photographs and accounts of travel to every major city of India and the world. We need physical reminders, buildings, monuments highlighting that happened. Textbook need to highlight this in a big way. So yeah, I mean, yes, we need that. And I think with there was also for a very long time, so there is one intent. So there wasn't really a political intent or government intent to take steps in this direction. And there was a second thing was a limitation in absence of having an open access to different kind of media and ability to put these things together in 90s and early 2000. It needed much more effort than it needs now. So probably going ahead, we can see more of the things being written, more communication being put out, more exhibit can put out and all that. But one thing is what I liked and I would like comment from you all is that we can probably, when you talked about that the houses that was occupied and people were expelled from, and if people cannot go back and live there, those can be standing monuments. And then probably that would focus on the solution of that people who have never lived in Kashmir, the Kashmiris, they will have a physical evidence of what had happened, and that will create a connection which will live on. Right.
Think sorry, when we're talking about sort of houses specifically, because you picked it up, it's my home or my parents' home, and ideally, obviously, they would like to go back there. But what are you going to do with the people who are actually living there now? Because there's a generation there that's probably grown
Mhm.
up. So it's a really really complex issue as far as sort of holding exhibitions to sort of what's happened and then getting more people to get involved. There has actually been stuff happening in India. There are Kashmiri organizations in India that have done this. So what I would say is do your research, look around, actually read, but please do remember that this is this is sort of living people you're talking about. These
Mhm.
people are not, we are not storybooks. We're not history yet. We are still alive. We're still kicking. We have sprung back from probably one of the worst things that could happen to a community, to a culture. And we are trying very, very hard to to grab whatever we can and preserve it and keep it alive in a very difficult environment, in the hope that someday we can actually go back home. So if you're going to do something, don't be that person who sat through the Holocaust and did nothing. Don't be that person who sat through a civil war and did nothing actually. And don't wait for someone else to do something. Maybe do start something, and then people will join you. That's what I'd say.
So I'll take just one last question, and that's for Sonal. It's a point of information that Gautam is asking, is that did government of India ever pay any financial compensation for the loss of property?
I think there was, I don't have the detail, but I think there was some kind of compensation paid. But I can't give you because our house was a distress sale,
Mhm.
and basically it was someone just said, well, do you want some money for it, or am I just going to take it anyway? And I think at that point my grandfather, because we had to have something to live on when we
Yeah.
were in Jammu, so because we had nothing basically. So I think that's at that point he accepted the offer. So we lost the house.
Mhm.
A lot of the times people weren't even given that. A lot of the times people were told that, make sure you do something nice. If they were sort of decorating their house or doing some renovation work, their neighbors would say to them, oh, make sure you do it properly because that's going to be mine. This was pre-planned. And as far as compensation goes, I think if we start to tally it up, and if we start looking at numbers, it's going to turn into millions. So that's probably another thing that we need to think about: proper compensation for Kashmiri Hindus.
Mhm. Mhm. All right. So, in favor of time, we have overshot our time now. So, we'll have to close it. There are a couple of more questions there, and there are comments there about that. There could be, when can be a movie like Schindler List be made about Kashmir genocide? And there was one question for Sonal, that do you speak Kashmiri, and is there a place in UK where people can learn it?
بہٕ چھَس کران کٲشِر پٲٹھۍ کَتھ. I do speak Kashmiri, and I also kick people's backsides if they don't, especially my Kashmiri friends around here. But again, it's there isn't any particular place. But if you wanted to reach out to me on Facebook or through Kashmiri Pandit Cultural Society, I can always connect you to people in the UK or the US where we're teaching spoken Kashmiri. There's a lot of places where people have actually also started to learn Sharda, which is
Mhm.
the original
The
script.
script. Yeah.
So in a way, we're doing stuff that maybe we weren't allowed to do that when we were in Srinagar. So
Mhm.
something positive.
All right. So thank you, everyone. With that, we'll close the session. So thank you all the panelists to join in. Thanks, Sahana, Hemant, and Sonal. And thank you, everyone who attended the session today. I hope you got few answers and few information. There's something to learn for everyone from the session that you attended. And going ahead, you would realize there's more expected from you to attend, and you also speak out when there is a chance for you to. And probably what happened in Kashmir is a lesson for everyone in India, that it's not an isolated situation. It's not a problem of someone else. It's your problem, and it's an Indian problem. It's not a Kashmiri problem that has happened. So on that note, thank you everyone, and we'll close the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaskar.